Welcome to Syndicated Nightmares, where each week we take a deep dive into an episode of the Freddy's Nightmares TV show based on the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. This week, hosts Dave and Michelle talk about Season 2, Episode 12, It's My Party and You'll Die If I Want You To, directed by Tom DeSimone and written by Jonathan Glassner and David Braff. And the original air date was March 12th, 1990.
Okay, yeah, I'll just start off on the bat. I loved this episode.
Yeah.
So I think this is one that is on VHS. Is that right?
It is, yeah. It's
Okay.
actually, I think it's the first episode I ever saw because I bought the VHS tape way back when.
Okay, well, bravo for picking this one for the VHS because I think so far it's the best one out of the series. I loved it.
Yeah, I was disappointed when I saw it when I was like 15 because I expected it to be just like the movies. But watching it, this is probably the first time I've watched it since then, and I was like, oh wow, this was actually really good.
Yeah, well, maybe now you think that because you have more episodes to compare it to.
Right.
So
that's true.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a few bones to pick with this episode, but that's not until the second half. So we'll cover the first half first. Yeah, and so we opened the episode at a psychic convention, the Springwood New Age Convention, and I think it's like where psychics and other as seen on TV products go to push their wares.
Yeah, it looks like they're selling all these like different jewels and artifacts.
I'm a vendor at conventions, and the table is anywhere for the whole weekend. It's anywhere from like $200 to the average of like $400, depending on how big the convention is, how popular, stuff like that. Now, some people they pay more if they want like an end table on the corner. So when I was watching it, I wondered like how much did she pay for her table to be there all the way back in 1990? What were the prices of conventions back then?
Well, I think she's like a headliner. So I think
Oh, that's true. So yeah.
maybe I was going to say maybe they pay her to be there, but probably not. I think she probably paid for her vendor table.
Oh, yeah, I would say it could go either way because like you said, she was the headliner for it, but she had to like still bring in a crowd for it. So maybe it was just like an even split of you don't charge us, we don't charge you, and you just bring people in sort of thing. Because I think she's like selling her book. Did she have a book that she was trying to sell as well?
I'm looking in my notes to see what she tells the assistant to do.
Okay.
Oh, she tells him to take money at the door.
Okay.
So maybe they're like paying to watch her go into the trances.
Okay, yeah. Probably like $5 a pop, something like that in the 90s. So Mara is a psychic medium, and she is trying to contact Captain Murdoch from Titanic. And I wonder if this is where James Cameron got his idea for the Titanic movie. Was this episode his inspiration?
She says he was the first mate, so I looked it up to see if that was correct, and it was. They did use the real name of the first mate from Titanic.
Oh, good. I want to say like that name did sound like it was accurate, but I'm not a Titanic expert, any type of historian to be able to validate either one. But yeah, so Mara is trying to contact Captain Murdoch from the Titanic, and she goes into a very quick trance to try to find him as she's like channeling him. And so he possesses her body, and she's going through the motions of there's an iceberg, there's so much water, we're sinking, and it was a very quick sinking according to Captain Murdoch's possession. And so she's throwing herself on the floor, and while the Titanic is sinking, and she yells out, "We didn't check the sonar," or something like that, something to do with the sonar. And that's when someone in the audience stands up and calls her a fraud because in 1912, there was no such thing as sonar.
He introduces himself as a professional skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what I kind of loved about the trance is that she was sort of talking like a pirate,
Right.
even though like was supposed to be the first mate from the Titanic, who probably did not talk like a pirate.
No. When were pirates like at their prime? What century was it?
Wouldn't that be a few hundred years before that?
I think so, yeah. So maybe if she was like contacting someone from the Mayflower, I would have been like, oh yeah, a pirate, but not the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
So she is all embarrassed because the professional skeptic calls her out and says there is no such thing as sonar, and the crowd is booing her and they want their money back. And then it turns out it was all a dream because she was reading a book about the Titanic, because it is in fact her next gig. She's going to try to contact Captain Murdoch, so she was doing her research. And when she wakes up, she kind of flips through the book, I think probably looking to see if there was sonar.
Right. Yeah, you've got to be ready if you're gonna, fake a historical figure for any questions someone might throw at you.
Yeah, that's true. And in 1990, it had only been, what would that be, 78 years since the Titanic sank. So it's very possible that someone was still alive that was on the boat, but I don't think they would have remembered it. Unless, they could have been like 10 years old when it happened, and been 88 years old in the audience. So yeah, that was a pretty risky move to do something from the Titanic, because of the possibility of one of the survivors would still be alive. It's kind of high,
right? But a survivor who would have known the first mate. Well,
that's true. Yeah, but there could have been a survivor like Rose, who was like really rich and her family knew all of the crew and got like a tour of the boat. Like she wakes up and it was all a dream. And then we cut to Freddy, and he's talking about how maybe someone will channel him because he's dead or something like that.
He says that chick shouldn't mess with the dead. Take it from me, I'm dead.
Words to live by.
Yes. And I thought, like, he looked great. Like the makeup and the lighting, it was the Freddy scenes were shot really well.
Yeah, I made a note in it, in my notes I put, it just didn't look like Freddy. Like the makeup was so clean and well lit. It was kind of like, is that Robert Englund? But yeah, he kind of looked like the Freddy from, I want to say, Nightmare 4. It was that kind of clean makeup, which was about, Nightmare 5 had already come out. So it was like Nightmare 4, 5 quality Freddy makeup, I would say.
I'm fine with that. Okay. I don't.
Oh no!
I like all the different Freddy looks in the movies.
Well, Freddy from Nightmare 3 is my favorite look, but probably just because Nightmare 3 is my favorite. But I also like 4 and 5. I did not like. I did not like the new Nightmare Freddy makeup. I didn't like the Nightmare 2 Freddy makeup either.
Oh, I love the new Nightmare just because it's. I don't like when I saw it in the theater, like the marketing hadn't really shown it, and then when you first see it in the movie, it's like cool because it's different than the Freddy and and creepier because it's unfamiliar. Yeah,
I was not on board with the new Nightmare makeup, and I did not like that he had 5 claws. I did not like the thumb claw. Nope, didn't like it.
Well, they never brought it back again.
No, they didn't.
Yeah. But yeah, and then the next scene, she's in is it her apartment or is she in a hotel?
I think they're all in the hotel is the main, it's a common denominator in this episode.
Okay. Oh, right. And they're in the hotel of the convention. And so it's the special return visit by Oliver, who was in, was it called Photo Finish?
Yes, the 5th episode, I think. Yeah.
So he was the photographer's assistant in that episode, and now he like shows up at her door and wants to be her assistant. because he reads auras and crystals.
Yeah. He comes in looking for a job, and he tells her like, "Oh, I used to work for this photographer, but she went blind," and that's how we knew who he was. Because at first I recognized him. I was like, "Oh, I've seen him before," but I figured it was from another TV show or movie or something. So it was nice that they kind of threw that in about the blind photographer, because I wouldn't have remembered. She hires him as her assistant, to take money at the door, be her bouncer, and also try to find basically schmucks who will pay her lots of money. And all for a whopping $10 an hour, which was pretty good in 1990.
Yeah, I looked up what the minimum wage was then,
Oh, good.
and it was $3.35.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so $10 an hour is pretty good.
I think minimum wage right now is like $8, like a little over $8. So that would be like making almost $25 an hour right now. Huh. All right, I would do it.
Yeah, she must rake it in at those conventions.
Yeah, she would have to for that kind of money, just to throw it out on some punk kid who comes up to you from the street. Can I have a job?
Right.
So she tells him that her channeling is fake, but the trance is real. So I guess that was just for his own peace of mind.
Well, it's good for him to know.
Oh, yeah.
That she's really in a trance. Yeah, and then we meet her friend Barry, who is also, I don't know, con artist / psychic at the convention, and they had a bet on who can win the most money from someone in a single visit.
Yeah.
And he made $15,000 in 3 hours by scaring off the ghosts of the Three Stooges.
Yeah, and so she owed him like $100 because the most she ever made off some sucker, as she put it, was $10,000.
But she's looking for that big score.
So that brings us to her actual seance with Captain Murdoch. And so Oliver is there being the bouncer and looking for anyone that he thinks that, she can smooze over. And the crowd is totally falling for her channeling act. And when she goes into her trance, they are just like eating it up totally. And so while she's looking for Captain Murdoch, Freddy decides to step in, and he possesses her. Yeah,
and she starts like spitting out Freddy lines. It's kind of great. Yeah. She says like, "Let's party," and something about like, "I'm not Mickey Mouse." And then Barry and Oliver run up to her, and she grabs them and throws them.
She says something like, "Who is this? Who are you?" And he's like, "It ain't Mickey Mouse." So whatever that was about, I'm sure New Line was having problems with Disney at the time.
Yeah.
Who knows? And I'm sure pretty soon Disney will own New Line, and who knows what they'll do with this episode.
I don't know. Warner Brothers seems pretty self-sufficient. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I guess Warner Brothers could I guess they could acquire it from Warner Brothers. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I don't know. In 5 years from now, if someone is listening to this, please let us know if Disney owns Warner Brothers or not.
Yeah, so apparently the situation is she's like in this dream world. She's like trapped inside the dream world with Freddy, and Freddy is in the real world in control of her body. Which is kind of like, they really play with it. It's really fun with him, like, vamping around in her hot body, and I liked that they had fun with it. And then Oliver is back downstairs at the conference, and he's talking to some girl she's selling pyramids. I don't know if that's really a thing.
Yeah.
At New Age things.
Yeah, I think the pyramids they're kind of like healing stones maybe, but they're in the shape of pyramids, and she's wearing them on her head and across her chest like a Madonna bra.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
yeah, so he's talking to her and he's like, hey, you look really familiar. Where do I know you from? And they realize that she was a model for the photographer before she went blind. And she was also possessed by Freddy in that episode for like a brief second. Because of that experience, she decided that modeling just wasn't for her, and she is selling pyramids instead.
So I looked her up and that she was in that prior episode, but
Mm-hmm.
do you remember her specifically in it?
I think she was the one who had the photo shoot where she was like, oh, maybe I'm mixing it up with somebody, but I think she's the one who had the photo shoot with the woman who was up against a street lamp and was like supposed to be in some type of
Oh,
alley area.
like it was like Jack the Ripper themed?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I think
got
that
it.
was her.
Well, nice to see her again.
Yeah.
But she's all starstruck that he works for Mara. So she wants to meet her, and he oh well, first the skeptic comes up and pretends to be the skeptic from the opening scene. He shows up and he's pretending that he's looking for a channeler to talk to his dead father. And Oliver is like, oh, the woman I work for can help you, and she's in room blah blah. So the skeptic goes to her room, and then the pyramid girl overhears, and she wants to go to that to go up to the room as well and meet her.
So I think his Harry Lee is his name, is the skeptic's name. And when he first met Oliver, he was wearing a toupee and glasses, and Oliver had never met him before, so the disguise really wasn't necessary. Harry wouldn't have known he was fooling him. Harry gets to Mara's room, and Freddy is like trying to learn Mara's voice, so he like goes back into the trance world that Mara is like stuck in, and he's like, say something, and she starts talking, and then he repeats it just like her, and so that's how he's like learning to do her voice so he can fool Harry and anybody else that comes along the way.
And he says like, Rich Little, eat your heart out, because Rich Little was the the comedian who could do all the impressions.
Oh, is that who that was? Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea who they were talking about.
Yeah, I just know who he is because he was on. I remember he was on the Muppet Show, and I think he was, like a panelist on old game shows.
Yeah. So Mara lets Harry into the room, and right about the same time, that's when the model gets there. Mara is still talking in Freddy's normal voice, and she's like, wait a minute, I recognize that voice. I'm out of here. And so Mara or I guess Freddy as Mara is like, no, come back, and lures her in. Freddy as Mara starts like putting the moves on this model. She's like caressing her hair and, being all Rico Suave. And the model's like, I actually wrote this down because I just loved it so much. So the model says, I don't go for that kind of stuff. I think you're pretty and all, but I like men, not women. And so then Freddy just kills her, just outright kills her.
But yeah, so she kills her in the bathroom and then comes back out to Harry. In this, I actually remembered this. I hadn't seen this episode in 25 years, and I still remembered this line when she's like being flirty with him and asks if she can make him a drink, and he asks for a Bloody Mary, and she says, "How about I make you a Bloody Harry?" and smashes a bottle and slashes his throat.
Yes, that was awesome. I think it was at that moment where I was like, this is the coolest episode that has ever come across Freddy's Nightmares. So Harry was turned into a Bloody Harry, and that's when Oliver and Barry come in, and Mara tells them that that Harry killed himself, and Barry's like, actually, I think you're in a trance and you're being possessed by somebody who wants to kill others. Let's perform an exorcism. So he just jumps to the conclusion right there.
Right.
So that's what they do. They do an exorcism spoof, the way that they like tied Reagan to the bed.
Mm-hmm.
So they tie Mara to the bed, and both Barry and Oliver have a jar of coins, and they're flicking coins at her, saying, "The power of money compels you. The power of money compels you," to like get this demon out of her. It doesn't work as much as they were hoping for, though.
Mm-hmm. I loved that, though. I loved the humor of it.
Oh yeah, it was hilarious.
Yeah, she sort of doesn't she like wake up and she knocks their heads together.
Yeah, she fools them into thinking that she's no longer possessed, and then they go to untie her, and that's when she knocks their heads together, and they're like knocked out.
Mm-hmm. And so Barry and Oliver decide they have to go into a trance to get her out. And Freddy, and it works. Like Freddy ends up releasing her, but then he takes over Barry's body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Mara wakes up and she's like herself again and out of the trance, and then he smashes. She had a pyramid next to the bed, and he smashes it into her head and kills her.
And it's like a big pyramid. It's like this pyramid is bigger than her head, and like he obviously kills her with the pointy end of it, and so she just has this upside down pyramid sticking out of the top of her head.
Yes. And then like Freddy stabs Barry in the dream world, and Barry bleeds out. Mm-hmm. And then I just love that it's just Oliver sitting there with all these dead bodies around him.
With 4 homicides.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Oliver realizes, like, I need to get the heck out of here before I'm charged with 4 homicides. Mm-hmm. And he starts talking about how there's a whole bunch of negative energy in the room. And then that's when it cuts to Freddy, and Freddy's like, I've never been negative in my life.
Yeah, then we get to part 2, still in the hotel, and there's a couple in bed named Denise and Larry, and they're in town for the Springwood High reunion, and they haven't seen it. It's the 20-year reunion, class of 1970, and they just reconnected there and slept together.
Yeah, it's a very trope plot line of any type of high school reunion episode where people like I didn't go to my 20-year reunion, and the only other lesbian in my class I like had no feelings for. So I don't think anything would have happened if I did go to mine. So I don't know if that's like true, like if that actually does happen.
Good question. I didn't go to mine either, and I can't think of can't think of anyone I would have that would have happened with if I had gone.
Oh well
yeah,
maybe for my 50-year anniversary we'll see. So so it's Denise and Larry had a fling for that night, and it turns out that Oliver now works as a bellhop or room service at the hotel. And he drops off room service for them, and he's like, man, this room has negative energy, and someone died in here. Or like he like tells them things that you probably don't want to know about the room you're staying in.
I feel like that would have made news if there'd been 4 dead bodies in a hotel suite.
Yeah, one being like a famous psychic.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so Oliver drops off the room service that Larry apparently ordered, and Denise lifts the lid, and to her surprise, it's a dead rat on a platter. So she screams and then wakes up because it was a dream she was having, although she did hook up with Larry as a high school one-night stand.
And she says she used to have nightmares before, but they stopped when she left Springwood.
Mm-hmm. And I assume she left Springwood probably very soon after high school, if not college.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, oh, don't worry about the nightmares. I'll protect you and all that. And she's like, no. No, he won't, Larry.
And then it cuts to Freddy with a graduation cap, and he says, kids used to drop out, now they drop dead.
So the next scene is Larry, and he's in his hotel room, and there's a newspaper on his table that says, Elvis is still dead. And I thought that was funny because in a previous episode, I think it was the second episode of this season, the reporter who had to go to the hotel to find out if Elvis was staying there because they thought that he was alive and staying there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I thought that was just a little Easter egg for that.
Yeah, and they also reference him. Yeah, and Larry is a screenwriter, and he's on the phone with his agent, and he's past deadline and needs to finish the script. And this doesn't really matter to the plot, but his agent was the guy who hired the psychic to get rid of the Three Stooges ghosts in his house.
Yeah. So bringing it back from earlier in the episode when Barry made his $15,000. So apparently they have some money to burn.
Mm-hmm. And then the room service cart comes in, and she lifts it up, and there's a rat, but it's a plastic one that Larry put there.
Yeah.
And she's not amused.
No, Denise is very upset over that. And he's like, what? It's just a joke. And she's like, it's not very funny. So she goes downstairs to like where the hall is for the hotel. What's that room called? It's not a hall. Like a meeting room space sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she goes down to where like the meeting room is for the hotel. And she sees another one of her high school peers, and I think her name is Cindy. And Cindy is like setting up decorations for the reunion, and they talk about how many people are going to be at this reunion. And Cindy's like, 19 have RSVP'd. And Denise thinks that's kind of funny because they graduated with a class of 300. So we learn that the majority of the students from class of 1970 were either murdered or are dead, or they just left Springwood and are never coming back.
Yeah. I think they say 146 students are dead, which seems like something Denise would have heard. Like she's totally oblivious.
That's a very alarming number of your classmates to be dead.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated with a class of 100. I had a very small high school and very small class. But so that would be like if 50 of my classmates died.
Yeah.
I think I would hear about that.
Yes. I think my class, was 181. Was my graduating class. Yeah. Yeah, and there's also this nerdy guy named Howard, who's, I guess we meet a bunch of people in this scene. So there's Howard the nerd, and then there's John and Mary, who are also from the photo finish episode from the second half of it, where the parents and their daughter get killed.
Yeah, that's right. And weren't they high school sweethearts, and then they got married?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess this episode takes place, since they referenced the photographer being blind, it takes place after the first part of photo finish, but before the second part.
So yeah, we'll have to come up with a timeline, which we will be talking about a timeline very soon. Mm-hmm. Because we find out from Howard that Howard used to hang out with a Freddy Krueger who was also their classmate.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So does that sounds right? Or
it is.
So they graduated class of 70?
Uh-huh.
It's not right?
It is not right at all. I went just to make sure that this was not correct. I went and researched Nightmare 6, Freddy's Dead, that timeline, and then also the timeline that is on the Nightmare on Elm Street site.
Mm-hmm.
And here it goes.
Okay.
So Freddy was born in 1941.
Oh.
So he would have graduated high school in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is 1990, then this would have been his 40-year reunion instead of his 20-year reunion.
30.
30. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So I dug a little further into the timeline because it was there, and why not? So Maggie, or Catherine Kruger, was born in 1961, according to Nightmare 6. That would have made Freddy 20 years old. And when he was arrested for killing Mrs. Kruger, his wife, and the 20 other kids, that was in 1966. So he would have been 25 years old. And in Nightmare 6, he does not look like he's 25 years old.
No.
No.
No, he does not.
And so if he got married, or if he had a daughter at 20 years old, I assume it wasn't out of wedlock, then he must have gotten married when he was 18 or 19 years old. But wasn't he in Alice Cooper's basement cutting up his stomach when he was 18 or 19 years old?
Right. I guess, he could have been 16.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But also this episode was made before Freddy's dead, so...
Oh, yeah, that's true. So they didn't have the timeline at all. But still,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe... So is Freddy's dead wrong? Do we count Freddy's Nightmares as canon when it deals with Freddy's timeline and backstory?
I don't know. I would go more with the movies, because the show just seems kind of contradictory sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. I also noticed, just a side note, on the chalkboard that's in Nightmare 6, when John Doe and Maggie visit Springwood Middle School, and that teacher is talking about 1492 Freddy sails the ocean blue sort of thing.
Yes.
On the chalkboard, it says Freddy killed Elvis in the 1970s.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the date because it was really small and really hard to read, and when I zoomed in on it, it was really blurry. But it was after. On the timeline, it was after 1966 when he was arrested. So either in the 1970s or the 1980s, he was accused of killing Elvis.
Excellent.
Just so you know.
So Nancy's parents must have been really young when they burned him alive.
Yeah, if they, burned him alive in 1966, I assume, or 1967 at the latest. Allegedly, if you follow the Nightmare 3 timeline, so Nightmare 3 happens in 1987, but Nancy says 6 years ago he tried to kill me and my friends. So that makes Nightmare 1 1981. Nancy's 15 or 16 in there?
Yeah.
So she was born in, math. She was born
65 or
in,
66.
Okay, 65 or 66. So, yeah.
Oh, that works.
Yeah, because she also had an older sibling. So, yeah, that timeline's okay then.
Mm-hmm.
That matches.
Although, do we count a deleted scene as canon? The older sibling thing?
It's become such common knowledge now because that scene has really sparked a movement. That maybe it might be canon at this point. That's a good question. We'll have to get the experts in on this and find out. Whoever they are.
Well, anyway, I was going to say this works with the pre-Freddy's Dead timeline, but no, the TV show still got it wrong because he wouldn't have graduated high school in 1970.
Yeah, that pushes the whole timeline back by 10 years. So. Yeah, they got it way off.
And also I have an issue with the timeline at the very end of this episode, but we'll get to that.
Okay, good. Okay. And then and then we also, something else that is addressed in this episode that I don't know if I want to agree with. So when they talk about Freddy being his classmates, so we find out that Freddy was their classmates. And then we see that Freddy mailed in his RSVP to attend the class reunion. And that freaks everybody out because Cindy, who apparently knows everything about everyone who graduated from the class in 1970, she's like, oh no, he killed and molested 20 children and then he was burned alive. And I think this is the first time where they actually say that Freddy molested a child instead of just alluding to it.
Oh, did she use the word molested?
She didn't, but Denise did when she went back to tell Larry about what happened.
Oh.
So Denise said, yeah, Cindy said that he molested and killed 20 kids and then was burned alive, and some believe that he comes back and kills you in your dream, sort of thing.
Yeah, I did like that she said, like, oh, he was that guy who wore a red and green sweater in high school.
Yeah, I think that was Larry who said it, because she was like, do you remember Fred Krueger? And he's like, yeah, wasn't it the guy who wore the red and green sweater every day?
Yeah. Yeah, so Freddy was a loser in high school, and Denise and Cindy pranked him on prom night.
Right.
And asked him, I guess Denise asked him to the prom.
No,
and then when he showed up to...
Freddie asked her to the prom.
Oh, Freddie asked Denise. Okay. Yeah,
Freddie...
And she said yes. But then when he showed up to pick her up, she didn't answer the door, and she and Cindy just laughed at him from her bedroom window.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if they were like in the bedroom window or hiding in the bushes across the street, like laughing at him. So either way, she now realizes that she has a just due target on her back with and Freddy is on the prowl.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty mean.
Yeah, that is mean. Yeah, I shouldn't do that to somebody. That's awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Howard comes up to the room, and he and Larry start talking about Freddy, right? Like, about Freddy being their classmate. And apparently Howard is a big fan of Larry, because Larry wrote such blockbuster hits as Attack of the Fungus People and Flesh Hand.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But Howard has a hidden motive as to why he wanted to talk to Larry. Apparently, Howard wrote a script of his own and wanted to give it to Larry to look over. Mm-hmm. And Larry's on such a tight deadline to turn in a new script, and he just doesn't have a single idea. So he tells Howard, if I like it, I might just steal it from you. Ha ha. And yeah. So that's, a little alarming for later.
And then Denise is in her room, and she's cutting the tag off of her dress, and she turns around, and Freddy's there on the bed in a tuxedo, which I loved.
It's a similar tuxedo to what he wears when he kills Greta in Nightmare 5. It has the red cummerbund and the red bow tie, but his shirt doesn't have the red frillies down the front. It's just a completely white button-up shirt. And I only know that because I looked to make sure, because I was like, this looks very familiar. And at first I thought it was what he was wearing when when he fake killed Kristen's mom in Nightmare 3. When he was like, well, I said, where's the bourbon?
Yes.
But no, he is wearing a red and green bow tie in that.
I do remember the red and green bow tie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always thought that it was just a red bow tie. I didn't know that it was red and green. So.
I think I know that because they made an action figure of that scene.
Mm-hmm. They also made an action figure of him as the chef for Greta's scene. So there are two Freddys out there.
Well, maybe one day they'll make an action figure of this.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. He says, like, you said you'd go to the prom with me, and attacks her, and then she wakes up and from the nightmare and runs and tells Larry and Howard, who's still there, what happened.
Yeah.
And then Larry doesn't believe any of it, and then she has another dream, and I just loved this scene when it's the prom theme again, and Freddy is pinning the corsage on her, and he's like, these pins are so little, and
And he
He's
keeps
like, wait, I have...
pricking his finger.
Yeah. He's like, wait, I have something bigger. And he just, is it the scissors or is it just a big...
He just pulls out a really huge pin. It's like almost a dagger. It's so
Mm-hmm.
big.
Yes. Yeah, and just stabs that into her.
Mm-hmm.
And then she dies in real life and she's stabbed with scissors.
Yeah. So then the police come to gather the body, and they think that Larry did it. And Larry's like telling Howard, or saying to Howard, like, no, tell them I didn't do it. I was here with you the whole time. Yeah. And Howard really isn't like sticking up for him, but also isn't pinning it on him. Part of the pun.
And then, and now Larry gets the great idea that he should write a screenplay about Freddy.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Freddy per se, more about if you die in your dreams, you die in real life sort of plot to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he attached Freddy to it yet at this point. Maybe he did.
Okay.
So then we go downstairs to the class reunion there was 19 people, but now there's only 18 people.
Yes.
Because Denise couldn't make it. And so they're like dancing and trying to have a good time. And that's when we found out that 146 students have died from the class of 1970.
Yes.
And so Cindy asks Larry to dance, and as they're dancing, she starts asking him about, hey, did Denise say anything about dreaming about Freddy Krueger before she died? And then Larry's like, well, hey, now that you mention it, yeah, she totally did. So that puts Cindy in a panic, because she's like, I've been dreaming about Freddy Krueger. I'm next. Hold me closer.
Yeah, and then Freddy does the, can I cut in? And he cuts off Larry's hand. He slices it off, and then he's the one dancing with Cindy, and he stabs her.
Mm-hmm. And then it turns kind of into a very Carrie-like prom ending, where all the students are at this dance. Well, I guess it's all 16 of them now. So all 16 of them are at this this high school reunion, and Freddy's in there, and they're like screaming and trying to get out, and he's telekinetically closing the doors and everything, and they're banging and trying to get out, and it was very Carrie-like.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Larry wakes up in his room. It was all Larry's dream, because Howard calls him from the reunion, and so we see that everything at the reunion is going fine. Nobody's getting killed there. And then Larry, after he gets off the phone with Howard, he calls his agent Leo to tell him about the script. And I guess, is that when he talks about that he's writing about Freddy? And then Freddy shows up and kills him.
Well, Freddy isn't happy that this guy has decided to write Freddy's life story. He doesn't think that Larry is worthy enough to write about him, so that's when he kills him.
And he rips his heart out, and he says, you've got to have heart to write the Freddy Krueger story.
Yeah. And then almost immediately, Oliver lets Howard into the hotel room, and Howard thinks that Larry died from a major heart attack. And Oliver's like, I'm getting out of here. There's just too much negative energy. And so Howard sees the script for what the audience now realizes is probably A Nightmare on Elm Street. And he reads through it, and he's on the third page, and he just realizes that he's holding gold in his hands, and he flies off to find a movie studio, and the rest is history.
Yes. And then we cut to Freddy holding the script for, it says A Nightmare on Elm Street on the cover.
Yeah.
So my issue with the timeline here, I mean, I know it's a joke, but but clearly it's clear what year this episode takes place in.
Yeah.
Because it's the 20-year reunion of the class of 1970. And the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie came out in 1984.
Yeah.
So that Yeah,
Well,
that doesn't quite work.
when I was first watching this, I thought, oh, Howard should have been named Wes. That would have been a nice wink and a nod. But then the more I thought of it, I was like, no, because Wes could sue for defamation because it would make it seem like Wes stole the script to A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right, from a dead person. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's a good idea they didn't name him Wes. They went with Howard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was my one initial thought with Howard. Like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
I wonder if anyone, like, watched it with no knowledge of the movie series, really, and thought that was, like...
It's possible.
that it was written by someone named Howard and sort of happened like that.
I'm pretty sure Fangoria was definitely around at this time. So there were interviews and, references to the story of A Nightmare on Elm Street. So yeah, I think the avid fan definitely would have known, but someone like my dad who was watching it with me, he wouldn't have known what was going on.
Right.
Yeah. And then I would, turn around and school him on my nightmare facts.
Right.
That's not how it happened.
Exactly.
Wes Craven was a little boy and he saw a homeless man and he was so scared.
And then he read this article about this kid who didn't want to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was a guy named Fred who bullied Wes Craven in school, and that's where the name came from. Overall, how did you like the episode?
Oh, I thought it was so much fun. Mm-hmm. It's not scary, but it was great. Like Freddy being Freddy, and they really had fun with it. Yeah, and it has the best episode title of any TV episode ever.
Oh, that's right. This is your favorite title.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved this episode. Like you said, it was so much fun. It wasn't scary, but it was the Easter eggs that they've started to plant from previous episodes, and just the small things that I noticed as an avid fan. My issue is the timeline, but they didn't have Freddy's dead yet, so it's kind of forgivable, but not really, because they could have guessed how old Freddy was from 1984.
Yeah, I know, but they sort of the TV show plays sort of fast and loose with the rules from the film. Because also he wouldn't, his thing is killing the kids, and here he's killing all the, he killed 146 people who are the same age that he is. Yeah,
that's very true. I noticed that when I was watching it, but I forgot to write it down in my notes. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah, that was another deviation from the actual plot of Elm Street. Yeah, but yeah, I loved it. I am so glad it's on VHS. So other people finding the series can have access to it. But yeah, I wish all the episodes were this awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. Please join us next week when we discuss Freddy's Nightmares Season 2, Episode 13, What You Don't Know Can Kill You, when Freddy hypnotizes us all.